Hi, I'm Allie. Join me as I show you how to make the Edgy Elegance leather wrap bracelet. We're going to be combining that soft look of pearl with the more rugged leather with an addition of that edging of seed beads using a brick stitch. If you need any supplies, go ahead and look below the video in the description to get links to get back to our website to gather them up. Let's get ready to get started. First thing to do is to take a look at our supplies. I'm using 2mm Greek leather along with some 6mm pearls. I have 11 OC beads, which I'm going to use along the outer edge of the leather, creating that brick stitch, and some smaller seed beads that we're going to be going up and creating the design. I also have 8 OC beads in a silver color, some 6mm of my corrugated rounds, as well as my 6mm of pearls. So we're going to get kind of that mixed tone and that mixed look. Don't forget that you're going to need a clasp or a closure. I'm using a simple Athenacast washer bead, and this washer bead is going to be used at the end of the design. First thing that we had to do was cut our leather. So I cut my leather and it's about double the length of my wrist. That allows me to have enough to tie my knots, enough to work with, and I'd rather waste a little bit of leather than not have enough. Not only did I double that in length, but then I doubled it because we need 2 strands going the whole way down our wrist. So I'm left here with about 24 inches of my leather. 6-inch wrist, 12, and then again, you have that 24. The first thing I'm going to do is create a loop with my leather. And creating the loop with the leather, I want to make sure that my closure here of that organic washer is going to go through the loop, but it's not too big that it looks really awkward on the design. Kind of pinching the leather in half there after having cut that 24 inches, I am going to create an overhand knot, doubling that, and then kind of manipulating the knot up towards the size of my washer. Once I know that the washer will fit through, I'm going to give a nice tight pull, tightening that loop. If you want to, you can actually take your pliers, go within the center or anything round, really a pen, and just kind of give a nice tight pull on your leather. That'll tighten up that knot. You want to make sure before you move on that your clasp still goes through. Keep in mind you're going to have a knot above, so you want enough space that your knot is going to be above your washer and you're going to be able to go through. From here, we're going to get ready with some thread to attach our beads. The thread to attach the beads that I'm going to be using is my dragon thread, and I'm going to be using it in the black color. I'm using size 8, which is the thickest that it currently comes in, and I'm going to take about a wingspan length of my cord, and I am pulling it all the way here. I'm going to take my thread zap or my thread burner. The dragon cord or the dragon thread is a thermally bonded cord, so I like to use my burner to make that cut. Flatten out the end of that, and then I'm going to put it on a size 10 beading needle. The size 10 beading needle is going to be in the middle here of my bead pack. That one's missing. Could use an 11. Grab another one here and use the size 10. Now for this project, it doesn't really matter what size you're using. The reason I'm using the size 10 is because it's the thickest and biggest, and that is going to just make it easier to work with. The smaller needles are going to be used, the size 11, the size 12, that's going to be used with smaller beads, say a 15 OC bead, but we're working with 8s and 11s. I'm going to go in and thread that needle now with that wingspan of thread, leaving a little bit of a tail there. And I'm going to go to the base or the bottom of that thread, away from the needle. From here, we are going to tie this on to our loop section here of our leather. I'm going to tie it directly below that loop and just tie the string or that thread around my leather. I'm going to do that for one tie. I'm going to go around the leather again, and this time when I tie, I'm going to go through the loop once, through the loop twice, and do a nice knot there. Nice tight pull on that knot, like there, like so. And then that extra thread there, I'm just going to burn down towards the project to get rid of. Once you have that thread gone and you're ready to go, we're going to separate out the leather and begin doing our beads in the interior. When we begin doing the beads in the interior, our beads, both our pearls and our metal corrugated rounds here, are 6mm. We need to get it from having the leather right next to each other to the 6mm and have that sit comfortably. Hence, that's where we have the 8/0 and the 11/0 seed beads. They're going to go in between that leather to create that gap. I'm going to pour out some of my 11/0 seed beads here in that pearl color. I've already got some of my 8/0s poured out, and take out some of my pearls as well. Once you've got those materials out, we're going to separate out the leather. And the first thing I'm going to do is pick up one of my 11/0 seed beads. I let that fall down next to my leather, and I'm going to kind of push the leather apart after the knot and let that bead kind of go into the middle of the leather, just with my fingers there. From here, I'm going to take the thread, go over top of the leather, have the needle come out from the bottom, and go back through that 11/0 seed bead. I give a nice tight pull, and that's going to loop the thread around the leather and kind of holds that seed bead as I push it into place. I want to loop around the other piece of leather, so I'm going to go underneath and loop my thread around that piece as well. And as I do so, then coming back up through the top here, I want to go back through that 11/0 seed bead again. I'm going to kind of portion that and stick that down to the base. And I get that 11/0 seed bead sitting directly in the middle. My thread's coming out the top of the bead over the leather. And I'm going to tuck the thread under with that needle. I'm going to feed onto it 2 of my 11/0s now. And you can do however many you want, or do a pattern, or you could skip to one of the 8/0s right away. After I put on those 2, I'm pulling the thread through. I'm going to go to the other side of the leather, go over the top of the leather, take my needle to the bottom of the leather, kind of come around to the top here. As I come around to the top then, making sure that leather lays after the first one, or that thread, I'm going to go through those beads and out to the top of the leather. Now I've done that on that side and I have it wrapped around. I'm going to go underneath again. And I'm an overkill. I like to make sure that I have a full loop around my leather. I'm going to go back through my 11/0 seed beads, wrap underneath my leather, and now I'm ready to go for my next one. Coming out the bottom between the leather, I can go in if I want to and put 3 of my pearls, which is what I'm going to do, increasing the size. You're just going to increase the size till it's about the width of whatever beads you're using. So in my case here, it's going to be about 4 wide, or we'll go in and we can use some of our 8/0 seed beads as well. We're going to go and tuck underneath and around the leather, taking the thread then and putting the needle through, and the thread so it comes out the top of the opposite side. Pull that nice and tight. And you want your beads to sit next to one another. You want to make sure as you're working with it that your leather's sitting even and not pulling to one side or the other. Going to the opposite side then, I'm going to go around the leather, take my needle and thread through the seed beads, and then it exits on the opposite side. Now I'm ready to go in and either do my pearl, I can do my metal, I can do some of my seed beads. So it's up to you what you want it to look like. I'm going to separate out my pearls with some of my seed beads. So I'm going to use 1 and 2 and say, okay, 2 is about that width. Let's go 3 because I want it to be a little bit wider and stretch that out. 3 seed beads go on. They're going to tuck into the interior there between the leather. Go over the leather. Take my seed beads back through the needle back through those seed beads after it gets wrapped around the leather. When I get to the other side, same thing. Take my needle back through from the bottom, going to the top, which will put this bottom strand of thread around the leather, and that gets that next look. Again, kind of take inventory, make sure your strands are straight when you're looking at your knot here, that's not pulling in one direction or the other. Tuck around to underneath, and you can see sometimes I take the needle through, sometimes I don't. We're going to grab our 6mm pearl, and we get to use our first pearl in here. So we're going to go back through the pearl here after taking the leather and having the thread loop around it. I'm going to pull nice and tight. Making sure that your pearl is not overlapping your seed beads, making sure you don't have a ton of thread there along the sides. Take care with this as you're making it. The nicer you get that thread look, the nicer it's going to appear. Once you get to the opposite side, back through the pearl one more time and out through the opposite way. You do not want your beads to be sitting on top of one another, but you don't also want a ton of space where you see a lot in between there. So here I have 1, 2, 3 of my 11s, followed by 3 of my 8s, followed by 1 of my 6mm pearl. I'm going to continue on with my design, going in here, and I can separate out my pearls by my 3 8/0 seed beads. Come down here, go through and wrap around the leather, up through the seed bead, and you're just going to continue this the whole length of your project until you get exactly what you want. You can use gemstones for this. I'm using the pearls because I love the look of the pearl combined with that leather. And once I go in here now, I can decide what I want my next bead to be. Do I want it to be my silver? Do I want to go in and do a series of pearls? Up to you what you want it to look like. But usually once it's open like this is kind of where I start to do that design and say, yeah, okay, maybe every other. Maybe I want to do a group of pearls before I go in and do that. So go in now, have fun, and start your pattern and take your time to make sure that your thread is nice along the edges of your leather. Do you want to know how to save over 50% on jewelry making kits? With a monthly kit subscription, you'll get 3 new kits for as little as $49.99. Remember, that's for 3 kits. That's a savings of up to $70 per box, plus you get free domestic shipping. This month, we have our best ever deals for new subscribers, including free tools, added boxes and kits, and even our ultimate beading kit for annual subscribers. Visit PotomacBeads.com/subscribe or click on the link in the description. Once you have your bracelet complete, and I've been kind of setting it down and, for lack of better words, kind of massaging it to make sure that it is straight. Now, naturally, it's going to go a tiny bit on a curve just because your thread is always curving slightly as you're adding your next bead, stepping from one straight line to the next. Down here at the bottom, I repeated the start, 3 beads of my 8s, then going into my 11s and downgrading, excuse me. And I'm almost at the end of my thread, which is great because we're going to do our fringe along the sides, that edging with a different piece of thread anyway. You can stop here if you want to, and we're going to attach the clasp. You don't have to use the brick stitch edge. That's up to you if you want to do that thicker look. So I'm just going to let my thread and needle kind of hang out there. And what I'm going to do is knot right after where the bracelet ends. I'm knotting the leather. Nice simple overhand knot. Not too close to that V, but close enough. Nice tight pull. You can see I'm using some tension and force, and I get that tie right there. On the end, I'm going to stick both strands through my button here. You can wait to do this or you can do it now. It's up to you. I'm showing you how to do it now in case you want to just have that button. And what I'm going to do then is separate my strands, and I'm going to do a knot. Pull that nice and tight, and then I'll trim down my leather. Now, you don't have to. If you have it sitting around, you can grab some glue, and what you're going to do basically is glue the knot together. So I'm not worried about the button and gluing to that. I'm just making sure that my knot does not come apart. So I'm taking that E6000 and just kind of dropping it right in the middle there and giving that a couple seconds to dry as we get ready to thread some new, or put some new thread onto my needle. I can go in now if I want to. You can keep this as long or as short as you want. I'm going to keep it equal to the button because I like the look of that. And that is your clasp end. This extra leather that we had here, you're just going to kind of put to the side. And I'm going to get ready again to do that brick stitch along the edge with a new piece of thread. So you can take that needle off of here, grab your thread, another arm's wingspan of thread here. And once you have that, we're going to get ready with our 11 O's. So go ahead and clean up your mat as your button and your cord there dries. and then we will go in. If you don't glue, not a big deal, just make to really forcefully tie that knot. At the opposite end of this leather bracelet, I'm going to take a new piece of cord, and I am going to start back where we did, basically with the start of the bracelet. And just like that, I'm going to take the new piece of thread. If you really want a really long piece of thread, I guess you could do it all in one. I'm using a second piece because if I decide I hate it or something like that, it's a separate piece. Also, if one piece breaks on the outer edge or anything like that, you don't have to worry about it. So same thing here, I'm tying it onto that outer edge and bringing that knot down. Now I did go back through to that starter edge and burned that thread edge down from the original one here, and I'll do the same here as I'm working with it. Now, what we are going to do is start doing brick stitch. We're going to brick stitch along one end, and then we're going to brick stitch along the other end. Brick stitch generally starts out with 2 beads, and we're going to use our leather and sew in between the strands of beads as our starting spot. So you're going to tuck underneath the leather with your needle here. You have those 2 beads on because brick stitch always starts with 2. You're going to go back up through bead number 2 toward bead number 1. That's going to get bead number 2 to sit so that way the hole is facing straight up and down from the bracelet. To center this first one, I'm going to go back into hole number 1 towards the knot. Or sorry, bead number 1 towards the knot. I'm going to go underneath that leather as well. This is just the annoying part of the start of the brick stitch. And we're going back up through bead number 1. Now, that will sit nicely, but we've got to go through bead number 2 one more time. And then we're at just single beads. Go through bead number 2 underneath the leather. Back up through that bead. And if you want to, you can pop a silver bead on the exterior of it, but I'm going to let my black thread show. Another bead goes on. Look about where that bead is going to sit in your leather. Tuck underneath the leather. Kind of pinch that bead towards the top. I'm going back up through that bead, so that way it is going to sit. Oops, let me get that untwisted so I can make sure I'm going the right way. Sit from the hole going from the side to top and bottom. So when you're looking at the side here, you should be able to see all of that thread right along the bracelet there, and we are going to map out and put those beads along the outer edge. Bead number 3 is on, and you're going to continue. You can always do bigger beads if you want to as well. I like this little version of the 11-0. Now you might say, what if I want to do leather on the exterior as well? You can totally do that also. When you do that, you generally are going to start out, if you want to look at our tile leather wrap, you're going to want to start out with the extra strand of leather to start, just so it's not as bulky. But as I talk, you can kind of see this going through. I put on my bead, I use my fingers to keep it towards the top of the bracelet here. Pull that tight, and I go back up through that bead, give a nice tight pull, and on to the next. You're going to notice it kind of pulls to one direction. When you do the opposite side, it'll start to straighten it out as well. But I'm going to get that smaller pearl look the whole way along this right line, and then at the end we'll weave through. I'll show you how to do that, and we'll come back up through to the opposite side. As you get to the end of the design and give that first layer of your pearls, you're coming out of the last seed bead. And I'm not going super close to the knot. I have a little bit of space. I could fit one more in, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go back into bead number 2. As I go back into bead number 2, after the last bead there, I'm going to tuck down into the design and go through the seed beads there that are along the edge. From here, I'm going to put on 2 of my 11-0 seed beads. I'm going to go underneath the edge of the design here. I'm going to go back up through bead number 2. I'm going to go back through bead number 1, but bead number 1, I'm going to build on from there, so I don't need to go back through bead number 2. And kind of turn it to the side here. Go back through that second bead there, which was the first one. Let's not go around the bracelet with my thread. Untwist that, there we go. Out through that seed bead right there at the top, and time to build on. That's it. So now flipping around here, I just go on get my brick stitch started. And there I have it. So as you start your second row, it's the same exact as the first row. Separating that out. And you'll start to notice that if it tends to turn a tiny way, that'll start to straighten out because you're pulling in the opposite direction here as you put on your beads with our brick stitch. And that really kind of flattens out the design. So you're just going to continue that brick stitch along the edge here, and it goes pretty quick once you get it down. It's almost like threading, putting a button on. Just doing that nice little edge of your pearl along the design. Continue on, and then as we get to the end of the bracelet, we'll tie off the thread. Once you get to the end of the design, you can see how it looks on the wrist in that nice kind of shabby chic look with the leather and the pearls. You're at the end here, and I'm going to go back a row. I'm going to go around the leather, through my starter bead there, and then I'm going to tuck my thread and needle between the brick stitch here, creating a loop, going back underneath the leather here, sewing through the loop once, sewing through the loop twice, giving a nice tight sewer's knot. And then I'm going to go in with my thread zap or my thread burner and just burn down all my thread ends flat to the project. Everything's dry at this point and everything's ready to go, and you are finished with your bracelet. And there you have it. Thanks so much for joining me in creating this fun Edgy Elegance bracelet. You can see how nice the seed beads look along the leather without the leather really taking over the design. Remember, if you do want any materials, need any leather, pearls, seed beads, etc., you can go below the video in the description and it'll give you links back to our website, which take you to a page that has everything listed in this video on it. If you haven't yet, hit that little subscribe button so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. Thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for more inspirational designs.